Welcome to Mom in Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. It's so much more than postpartum depression. We raise the volume on all of these topics in the hopes that someday everyone will have the support and info that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/momandmind. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Welcome to the Mom in Mind podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kat. I'm really excited for today's guest. This is sort of a full circle moment. I started this podcast 3 years ago, and my very first guest was Dr. Shoshana Bennett. She came on for episodes 1 and 2 and graciously came on when I was new at this. She tolerated my fumbling around and poor sound quality as well. And she knows a thing or two about sound quality, having her own radio show. Well, I'm so grateful to have her back as the first guest for the 3rd year of the Mom in Mind podcast. This time, bringing the perspective of being a new grandmother with her own history of postpartum mental health challenges. This is such a necessary conversation, especially as the field of perinatal mental health continues to grow. We are recognizing and treating perinatal mental health conditions more and more. So there's awareness of these conditions now. And also, as those moms who've experienced a perinatal mental health condition develop into grandmothers, this will be something to consider. What happens when you yourself had a history of perinatal mental health issues and your child is now becoming a parent? How does that affect you? Dr. Shoshana Bennett, also known as Dr. Shosh, educates, engages, and empowers her audience while discussing serious and often uncomfortable topics using humor, the latest research, solution-based protocols, and firsthand knowledge she gleaned after experiencing life-threatening postpartum depressions. After these 2 life-threatening bouts of postpartum illness, Dr. Shoshana Bennett helped pioneer the field of maternal mental health. She founded Postpartum Assistance for Mothers in 1987, became president of California's state organization, Postpartum Health Alliance, then served as president of Postpartum Support International. Dr. Shosh is the author of Children of the Depressed, Postpartum Depression for Dummies, Pregnant on Prozac, and is co-author of Beyond the Blues, Understanding and Treating Prenatal and Postpartum Depression and Anxiety. She is an executive producer of the documentary Dark Side of the Full Moon, and she also co-founded the Postpartum Action Institute. To date, she has helped over 20,000 women recover around the world through private consultations, teleclasses, and support groups. And today, she's discussing her experience of becoming a grandmother and what that has brought up for her regarding her own history of postpartum illness. She shares candidly about her inner process and thoughts and also speaks to the ongoing stigma and myths of what you're supposed to feel as a new mother and new grandmother. She's going to be reading from the article that she wrote, and then we'll be able to have a discussion about that. And I'll be posting the full article on Facebook and Instagram for reading and sharing. I'm honored to have Dr. Shosh on to read her article and share in discussion about this vital topic. Now let's hear from Dr. Shosh. Welcome, Dr. Shosh. Thank you so much for being with us again.
It is absolutely a pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Kat.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to have you here for many reasons. Getting to know you over the years, you're just a phenomenal person and clinician, and you bring such good and deep perspective to the world of perinatal mental health. And with this article that you've written, I think it's an untapped perspective at perinatal mental health. I'm really excited to have you on to share about it.
You know, Dr. Kat, I will say that it was when you and Dr. Rezminski and I were presenting together, and I think we were having dinner, and I was talking about some of these feelings about what I eventually put in the article. You were one of my main reasons. I mean, you gave me lots of encouragement
to
write this article, and I wanted to tell you, thank you, because it is an important topic. So what I'd like to do, with your permission, is to read this short article, and then I will let you know what's been happening as I've sent them to various publications and what I've heard back.
Yeah,
okay
perfect. Yeah, perfect. Let's do that.
It is entitled, Scared to be a Grandma. As I rounded the corner of Mariposa and Puerta, walking toward me was yet another "I love being a grandma" t-shirt. I smiled, but passed her quickly, not wanting to make conversation. The retirement community where I live is, of course, packed with grandparents. When meeting someone for the first time, the opening chat often includes, "Do you have children?" If the answer is yes, it's followed immediately by, "Any grandkids?" Usually the asker doesn't really care about the answer. The question is used as an excuse to brag about the cute behaviors and/or successes of their own grandchildren. Although my answer to that question is still no, my beautiful daughter is 6 months pregnant. She has wanted a baby for years, and I'm truly happy for her. However, for myself, major worry has been emerging ever since she shared the news with me. Just as in motherhood, the expected societal emotion is excited anticipation. As much as I'd love to identify with the t-shirts, at this moment, I cannot imagine ever doing so. I experienced 2 severe, life-threatening postpartum depression and anxiety illnesses after both of my children were born. Horrifying thoughts and images of harm coming to my babies paralyzed me with fear, often literally rendering me unable to move. I was obsessed with keeping my babies safe, and it thoroughly overwhelmed me. I felt intense inadequacy about my imagined inability to protect them. The terror prevented me from sleeping, eating, or experiencing any joy. I became despondent. The all-consuming hopelessness about ever feeling normal again led to serious thoughts of suicide. I was convinced my husband and children would be better off without me. I was plagued with this nightmarish mental state every day and every night for years, since there was no recognition or help for these disorders back in the 80s. There was nothing but ignorance and criticism surrounding us. Those who loved me tried their best, but no one had a clue how to help. After a year into my second devastating postpartum illness, I launched into a new career pioneering the field of maternal mental health. I founded my first postpartum organization and started running support groups from our home. Every week, between 5 and 15 women and their adult support people filled our living room. There was no internet back in 1988, so word about the groups could only spread through a couple of posted flyers and person to person. I remember the mothers of the new moms in my groups wide-eyed as they realized they themselves had gone through the same illness as their daughters. They thought that they had been accompanying their daughters to the groups only as supports. It was magical to watch their amazement as their own postpartum puzzle pieces finally fit. They usually ended up participating fully in the groups along with their daughters, often with tears of relief and gratitude flowing. I survived those nightmarish years, however narrowly, and managed to eventually develop a close relationship with my children. My career helping suffering parents around the world, writing books on the topic, and training professionals has been flourishing for over 30 years. However, since my recovery decades ago, I've had no interest in becoming a grandmother. The thought of another baby entering my world rekindles the postpartum trauma, which had taken years to resolve and heal. The old disturbing dreams restarted last night, which finally prompted me to write this article. In my dream, I was caring for my daughter, who was a very little girl. I eventually lost her in a crowd. I couldn't protect her, my worst fear. I made myself wake up and found myself with a tight chest and in a cold sweat. Every time I picture babysitting my grandchild, tension in my stomach and chest wells up. I utilize the mindfulness techniques I teach my clients as a clinical psychologist, but sometimes the anxiety gets the better of me. When I tell my neighbors that my daughter is expecting, they automatically assume I'm elated. But when I've expressed ambivalence to those who I would have thought would be sympathetic, my feeling is often met with disbelief, surprise, and downright disdain. Just like the postpartum feeling about my babies, how could a grandmother not fully love taking care of her grandbaby? The postpartum criticism from others, plus my own inner thoughts arise, such as, "What do you mean you feel so much anxiety you don't want to be alone with your own child? What's your problem? What kind of a woman and mother, and now grandmother, are you?" Just as parents-to-be and new parents shouldn't have any shame about depression and anxiety, grandparents shouldn't either. The more I speak with survivors of postpartum depression and anxiety in my age group, the more I realize how common this phenomenon is. About 1 in 7 new mothers experience postpartum depression and anxiety, so it makes sense that now as grandmothers, these old feelings can be triggered. We need to start talking about it more openly, as we're helping to rid society of the stigma of depression in mothers and parents in general. We should do the same for grandparents. Maybe in addition to grandparent support groups that create a safe place to talk about these challenges, or maybe even combine these groups into one, like what happened spontaneously in my living room years ago. I look forward to embracing this baby and experience with open arms and lots of hope for the future. And who knows? My grandma ambivalence may disappear in time, and I just might join the I Love Being a Grandma t-shirt brigade in the coming months.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That is just so deep. And I had so many feelings come up, just listening to you read through this. I can't even imagine how many people will be able to resonate with it, truly.
And that's, of course, Dr. Kat, with your wonderful show. And I thought to share this article with you and the topic. And, I'm not surprised with your wonderful focus and with your perspective and how many wonderful adjectives can I give here? You were the person.
I've got time.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You're very generous.
You can hear them even though they're not coming out of my mouth. I hope. I'm sending you this with such admiration. I cannot think really of a better venue because your podcast goes out to the people who are the sympathetic listeners and who do want to hear. I want to tell you what's happened when I sent this article to various publications around the country. What I heard back were the exact same words that I heard back in the early 1990s when I was first submitting articles on this brand new thing called postpartum depression.
Wow.
Yes, the words are identical. What I've been hearing back is not a good fit. Now, not a good fit usually means our audience won't be interested in this topic.
Right.
Right? And I'm thinking, wow, it was fascinating to me. I mean, really.
Mind-blowing.
Yes. So what you are helping to do, Dr. Kat, and again, it's always an honor to work with you in any capacity. We are paving new ground. Just like back in the 90s, we were paving new ground with postpartum depression and anxiety. So I have this newfound passion welling up, that like an offshoot of what you and I have been doing for a long time, that this is an area that truly needs to be discussed. And just like, these same publications and magazines are interested in, they're eager, as a matter of fact, to publish articles on postpartum depression. I am hoping that at least in a couple of years, maybe a few years, with the right kind of work on our part, they will welcome these articles as well on grandparents.
I sure hope so. Because, we kind of do talk about already a little bit, maybe, that when a baby's born, grandparents can be affected too and keep an eye out. But that's kind of very much in professional circles. It's not talked about widely, certainly not publicly in any way that I've heard. So you kind of, I think, blowing the lid off of this, like, hey, look at us, listen to us. We are part of this too. We are affected as well. And I agree with you. I think that parallel process that's happening between what happened in the 90s for you and what's happening now, people don't know what they don't know. It's a hard thing to wrap your mind around because just what you said, the myth and this ideal that grandmothers and grandparents are just over the moon. Well,
exactly. It's at least as difficult as talking about, right? I was talking about a mom having ambivalent feelings. A grandmother?
Right.
It's at least as mind-blowing to many, many people. But yeah, you and I are not afraid of speaking the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been, I'm a believer in being real.
Yes.
I remember when therapists would tell me, as I'd be giving these talks 30-something years ago, you're so brave to talk about your experience, your personal experience. And I'm thinking, brave, honestly, that didn't make sense to me. We're all in this together. There's no them and us.
Right.
To me, it was fascinating, the human being having these grandma, scary feelings coming up. But as a therapist watching it, to me, it was simply fascinating, right? But so important to be talked about. If we can't be real with each other, right?
Right.
It's so, so, so important just to tell it like it is so that we can destigmatize.
Right. Absolutely. And then also what happens not only to you, but to other grandparents who feel like they can't say anything. It's just a repetition of the trauma from their first experience. That like, okay, I have to also pretend I'm fine now and set aside my feelings and, it's not your baby, it's your grandbaby or whatever some people might say that is discounting and further making people feel like they can't or shouldn't talk about it. That's my fear for grandparents.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I'm just so absolutely delighted that you invited me on, that you knew, clearly you knew that it was important to be talked about. You encouraged me to even write this article. And I will give you an update. My daughter is ready to deliver any day. Her due date was a couple of days ago.
Oh, goodness.
So at this point, it will happen at any time. And I still have, although I embrace whatever support I feel I need, and you join me with this. Whenever we have our own personal stuff comes up, we get help, right?
Absolutely.
We practice what we preach. So I have been getting support from a couple of therapists who also happen to be friends, and it's been very, very useful. And so, as I'm working through my own stuff and watching this process, still some mixed feelings, still some anxiety will pop up with what if this and what if that, the old OCD. I know how to track OCD. I happen to be, I'm a specialist in OCD. I'm thinking, what would I tell a client right now?
Oh, totally.
And, working
dialogue. Yep.
Yeah, of course. But to understand and kind of see it from the perspective of this is to be expected. This is absolutely a natural thing to pop up considering the trauma of the past. And what do I need to do to help myself with it? So it's really embracing the whole journey. My daughter's having her very own journey, but I'm having my own. That is just as interesting and valid.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that you're getting support. And the pressure to get things all tied up with a nice bow and to, be done with our stuff or whatever it is before the next event happens, whatever that is nice, but it's nearly impossible. You can't force a process. It's a process and it takes its time.
Exactly, Dr. Kat. And sometimes we don't even know what needs more help until we find ourselves in new situations. How can we possibly know that? Even though I knew I was kind of about being a grandparent, right? How could I have anticipated, going back into flashbacks and having nightmares? Who would have known that? So once we find ourselves in a situation and we see what comes up, then we have more of an idea of what needs to unfold in order to help us, and we take the steps that we need. There was no way I could have anticipated all of this until I was in the situation. Just like mommies and daddies and all parents, right? Yeah. Sometimes they have no idea what feelings are going to pop up until they're there.
Right. And that's what I love so much about this article and you being vocal about it is I wouldn't have known the possibilities of things I could have felt had I not heard stories from other people. And yes, while true that you still, even if you hear all the stories, you're not going to know what it's like. But if you don't even know that it's a possibility, then you're totally in the dark. So I'm really hopeful that people can hear this and share this with grandmothers, grandparents, or meanies or Grammies, whatever you guys are calling yourself, that's fine. But really, this is so important to share in another aspect of, how to keep the whole family system in tune and as healthy as possible.
Absolutely. Well put. And to start the conversation is important.
Mm-hmm.
Watch what happens. I'm talking to your listeners now. If there's any feelings of judgment coming up from you, or, oh, no, that should never happen, or that will never happen. I'm encouraging your wonderful listeners to be honest with whatever pops up for them, because that will give them information about what kind of possible work or other reading or discussions they want to do in order to be as healthy as they possibly can be for themselves. Hopefully that made sense.
Oh, absolutely.
But, we need to watch our own reactions, right? So if somebody hearing this article is going, oh my gosh, that's horrible for, again, don't judge yourself if you judged. Okay. That's totally fine with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Fine. I'm just encouraging your listeners to be super honest with themselves so that they can work through whatever stigmas they might still be holding on to, possibly, if any.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm thinking too of, let's say, the people who are pregnant or who are about to have kids, and they're hearing that this could be a possibility for their own parent. If they know that their parent went through this, this would be a lovely way to have a conversation too. And this doesn't mean, I think some people are so afraid or worried to upset their parents, which is fine. But also this could be, just like you said, a beautiful entrance into a conversation. Not necessarily something that you have to be afraid of, but if you just in terms of maintaining a connection with your parent who's going to be a grandparent, that there can be space for them, for your grandparent to both be there for you and to also have their feelings, that this is a both and situation, or it could be.
Well put. And just like postpartum depression and anxiety is nothing to be afraid of. It's just good to talk about it. Just opening up the topic and making it safe to say something. And, again, I am thoroughly thrilled for my daughter. And I'm looking forward to the whole experience. It's not like I'm running in the opposite direction. So, again, can it be mixed? Absolutely.
Right.
So yes, I love what you said about just, you and I have always been on the same page with opening conversations. That's why you have a podcast, right? I mean,
that's why you've had a radio show.
Right. I mean, that we want conversations about some difficult topics, and that's what helps our world move forward.
Absolutely. It really does. Well, I love so much this article and you and your work and everything like that. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. And is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with today?
I would welcome any comment or question or thought from any of your terrific listeners. If you have questions, if any questions pop up after they listen to this podcast, please feel free to get in touch with me. And I'd love to hear what folks, again, this is all about getting the conversation started. So I'm welcoming any communication with me about this, about anything else for that matter, but certainly on this topic. Well, my website, and it's very easy to find me in many different ways on my website. It's drshosh.com, DRSHOSH.com. My email is drshosh@drshosh.com. And again, I would welcome any communication, feedback, etc. And Dr. Kat, I really want to thank you, as always, for your wonderful self, for having this venue for us to help to pioneer this field.
Whew, wow. You're going to make me cry. Thank you. Well, you are absolutely a pioneer. And once again, you are, by leading this conversation for grandparents and putting this out there publicly. I thank you so much for your work.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Shosh, for coming on and sharing your experience and your perspective and this information with the world. I'm so grateful that you're leading this conversation for all of us to be thinking more deeply about the generational impact of perinatal mental health conditions. And as an update for all of you, at the time of this interview, Dr. Shosh had not yet become a grandmother, but on June 5th, she did. Although anxiety and scary thoughts have flared up here and there, she's able to enjoy her grandson. Watching her daughter have a totally different postpartum experience than she herself did has been quite healing. I thank you all for joining us, and please do share this episode with people you think might benefit from hearing this depth of perspective and conversation about entering into grandparenthood. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you can get all of our episodes downloaded directly to you as they come out, and share as far and as wide as possible so that all new parents can get the information that they deserve before they need it. That's it for today. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us at momandmind.com.